Hi guys, back with another episode of the Grapplers Academy. We've got Simon Bonn back again, breaking down another really good match for you today. Today's match, we've got Andre Galvao versus Palhares. It's a match from the 2011 ADCC, which was actually in Nottingham. Absolutely awesome match. If you don't know anything about the two guys that are in it, you've probably been living under a rock, or you're completely new to jiu-jitsu. Andre Galvao is an absolute legend of the sport, and when you look at his record alone, aside from the other accomplishments he's got, it's absolutely phenomenal. Like ADCC wins from 2009. He's pretty much medalled in ADCC since 2007. And then Superfight win, Superfight win, Superfight win, 88 kilo win, absolute win, everything.
Like he's medalled probably from blue in every belt in the world champs as well. So he's got 2 wins at blue, two medals at purple belt, 2 medals at brown belt, and on his record from 2005, 6, 7, 8. And there's a little gap there. Then it's 2013, 14, 16, 17. All medals at the black belt world championships. Like you said, he's a very accomplished player. And the way he performed in this match, it's kind of like a testament to that. And it's kind of like it was like, would you say this is like the start of his reign of the no gi world, and probably even the gi world? This sort of match and this tournament.
Yeah, certainly when you look at it on paper, looking at his win streaks after that, he's got very few losses after this match. Felipe Pena, Leandro Lo, but other than that, making a tear through pretty much every competition or super fight that he's going into. And on top of that as well, you know, cementing his legacy with the school that he runs, Atos, out of San Diego. Their legacy as a team as well. You know, you've got guys like Keenan Cornelius having trained there. Josh Hinger trains there.
Lucas Hulk. The Ruotola brothers coming up right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That arguably that gym's probably the who's who at the moment of the grappling scene. Like you got JT Torres as well, is another great example of the Atos pedigree. And I think as well you've got to give Galvao his due here, like being able to accomplish such high levels within the academy, as well as still maintaining the sort of top end tier of his grappling career as well. That's a huge achievement in itself.
Yeah, and you touched on a really interesting point when we were just talking before we started recording about prior to this 2011 ADCC, he didn't have as good a success at 2009 in the previous ADCC. But you know, you mentioned that it had been brought up in an interview that at that point he was still within his MMA career. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because that was actually quite interesting.
Yeah, so I can't recall quite where I saw it or read it, but he's mentioned that like it was after or on the lead up to this ADCC where he sort of decided to shelf his MMA career to focus a bit more on his grappling. Like don't get me wrong, in the previous ADCCs, he still reached the final of the absolute and of his weight category, and he lost to arguably 2 of the other top tier greats of this sport. You got Janji Ribeiro and Braulio Estima. But it was during that sort of time between sort of like 2010 to 2008 where he'd had an MMA career. He went 7-2, and his one of his losses was his last match. Unfortunately, he got beat to ex-UFC middleweight champion Tyron Woodley, which is no sort of nothing to turn your nose up at. Like Tyron Woodley is a phenomenal athlete and fighter. But personally, I think it was the right decision for Galvao to focus on his grappling career, as sort of being torn between the two could have sort of made him not excel at the one. And it's kind of shown with the reign he's had with the ADCC Superfights now that, like I said, he's made the right decision in going down the path that he's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish off on that, looking at the last ADCC, comes in with a great victory again in the Superfight and sets up a really interesting match that I think everybody in the grappling world is looking forward to in 2021 versus Gordon Ryan. That is an epic
100%.
match.
I think if that match, because there are rumours of him talking about retirement, aren't they, between now and then, which would be a great shame if that does happen. But at the same time, you can understand why he may want to retire. So looking at his age now, he's 37 years old. He's been competing since, on here, he's got his first silver medal at blue belt in 2001. So he's had a 20-year career in the grappling scene. So you can understand if he does decide to retire before next year. But like I said, I'd absolutely love to watch Gordon Ryan, who's arguably one of the greatest at the moment, versus, for me, one of the greatest of all time in Galvao, who's excelled in both gi and no gi.
Yeah, really looking forward to that much. Gordon Ryan's doing a good job at the moment of complimenting him enough to get him to go into it, but also talking enough shit that he's going to goad him up as well. So, I think he treads that balance quite well.
Definitely.
Now, let's talk about Galvao's opponent in this match that we're going to review today. Not quite as prolific a grappling record for Palhares, but he's got a big focus in his MMA career, and a decent grappling record. If we look at his MMA career to start off with, loads of fights, 19 wins, 10 losses, fought in the UFC, fought matches against the likes of Jake Shields, where he's won. He's fought Hector Lombard, Nate Marquardt, Dan Henderson, big names in the sport.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, it's not like he's not a submission fighter. Like, a lot of his wins have come via submission, and he's quite a feared opponent when he does get onto your legs, because he's known not to let go. If he does get hold of something, he's trying to take it home with him, whether you tap or not, which unfortunately I think has damaged his career in MMA, and it's made a lot of promoters possibly not want to sign him, which it's quite unfortunate, because he was exciting to watch. At the same time, he wasn't scared to stand there and exchange with you, and if it went to the ground, he was just really aggressive in looking for that submission that he's after.
There's a couple of good matches out there as well after this match that we're going to review today. He's had a match against Gary Tonin, Craig Jones, Gordon Ryan. That Gary Tonin match on Palhares was phenomenal. Gary Tonin was not afraid to go at him for the legs as well, and probably one of the most exciting, well, if not the most exciting match on that card and some of the other Palhares events. Really exciting match. If you guys haven't seen that, I'd really recommend going checking that one out. I think that one's on YouTube as well. Super exciting match. But yeah, just again to say about his bad reputation on the legs. We see in the build up to this match, the initial rounds, the quarterfinals and the semi-finals. This match that we're going to watch today is the final of the 88 kilo category. All his wins all the way up through ADCC up to this point were heel hook, including a win over Rafael Lovato, who is arguably, again, one of the greatest of all times. And now he's doing it in MMA, current Bellator middleweight champion. Yeah. No slouch. Yeah. So maybe if we get into it and look at the first initial exchange that happens in this match is a bit of a series of leg entanglements. So what we'll do is we'll cue that up. We'll talk quickly about that and then dive into the match after that.
No, definitely.
So straight into the match here. First exchange that we're going to look at, is, as we were just talking, is the leg exchange that happens pretty close to the beginning of the match. Palhares has had a good run in this tournament with heel hooks, so naturally that's the first thing that he's going to be looking for here, trying to get Galvao to the ground, get underneath him and start on that leg exchange. But as you go through this is an 88 kilo match. Look at the absolute size of these guys. Palhares is a short guy, but I think he's probably about 5'8" wide and 5'8" tall. Yeah.
And like I was saying before, with his match against the Steamer 2 years ago, well, 2 years prior to this, Galvao has on a considerable amount of size as well, and he's in the same weight category. But sort of as you mentioned here, Palhares is looking for those legs from the get-go. And you can sort of see the sense of urgency that Galvao's got in defending his legs. And it looks like he's got straight onto the bite of this straight leg footlock. But Palhares jumped straight for the heel. And Galvao's doing a great job here defending the knee line, making sure that that bite's not there and making sure that nothing, like it's not being cinched on too tightly.
Yeah, no panic there. Just intelligent defence, doing everything right and making sure that he's keeping himself safe. And I think that the main thing to go into and consider from a defensive point of view throughout this exchange is he wants that heel, and Galvao knows that. So he does a really good job of triangling off his legs and tucking that attackable leg behind the back.
I think that was one key point that you noticed, picked up on, was sort of this bottom foot here that he's hiding is actually his free leg, and he's used that to triangle his entangled leg. And like I said, when you picked up on that, I didn't purchase it at first, so it was a great find from you there, Bonn.
Yeah, it's a great position. Like there's basically nothing that's exposed there from Galvao's point of view. He's got his foot planted on the floor, and the other one you can see is on the opposite side of the body from what Palhares wants to attack. And he's actually doing enough of a good job in that 50-50 position that's going on to threaten Palhares' legs. There's a bit of back and forth there. I found it really interesting that he was willing to just go toe to toe with him.
Oh, definitely.
Pardon the pun.
I think as well, you'll notice once Palhares started to get his own legs attacked, he sort of wanted to come out of that exchange a little bit.
Yeah.
And from the rest of the match here, you notice that he doesn't really go for the legs with the same sense of urgency once he knows that Galvao's happy to, like you say, go toe to toe with him on the leg locks.
Yeah, and this bit of the match immediately after that first leg exchange, I really like. Galvao does some, as it's being called nowadays, some aggressive butt scooting. He stays down after that first exchange and just goes at him, but comes up on a beautiful single leg and starts to wrestle from the floor.
Oh, definitely. But yeah, back to that sort of leg entanglement. You can sort of see where that's what Palhares' like A game and plan A was. And you can sort of see that once Galvao wasn't scared of him and he was ready to go, all right, then I'm going to play this game with you. Palhares sort of backs off a little bit and he doesn't attack the legs in the same sort of aggressiveness as he once was at the start of the match.
And do you think that's a case of, from Galvao's point of view, is feeling that first bit of the position out, having an intelligent defence of it, and knowing that the sort of pinch and bite that Palhares was getting on the legs wasn't threatening enough? Or what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it is like part of Galvao's sort of fight IQ here, where he's like, do you know what? He's probably done his research and like I said, he just thought, you know what? I know what Palhares is looking for here. If I can neutralize that, I can shut that down and I can hide my legs and attack his legs in the same sort of ferocity and intelligence. It's going to put him on the back foot and it's going to force Palhares to potentially change his plan. And if he's not got a plan B, that's sort of where you're going to become unstuck.
Yeah, really good strategy there. And I think now this next sequence that we go through, if we play through on this, is that wrestling from the floor that we were just talking about, that aggressive butt scooting, coming up on and eventually getting the back.
So yeah, as you mentioned before, with the sort of aggressive butt scooting, sort of Palhares and Galvao, they sort of had a bit of an exchange where it was Galvao staying in his butterfly guard and playing from there. And Palhares almost of sitting back on his heels and almost not exchanging. And then we come to this part here where Galvao manages to get underneath and starts to work for a sweep, comes up on top and gets a lovely sort of takes it out of bounds, but starts attacking that back take from the out of bounds position. And they get reset in the middle and he manages to get the back. So is there anything you want to sort of add in there, Bonn?
Yeah, I think like you were just saying, that lack of sense of urgency now from Palhares has meant that even though Galvao's on the floor, and traditionally the guy on the top would have an advantage in position here, because Palhares isn't really going for anything. It just allows Galvao to go at him and open up his defense and then start attacking for that sweep. And it's a really beautiful transition. So when we go into the play on this match here now, you'll see that it's a beautiful sweep, and he's able to just follow it straight up. He knows exactly what he's looking for, and then comes out with a back position that ends up getting reset in the middle of the map.
So yeah, I was going to play it through here. You can sort of see Galvao's lifting him up, and he turns him over, and he managed to get a lovely sweep here. And this is where he starts to work his pass. Palhares defends, and then he turtles up. And this is where I think if it would have stayed on the mats, so we're just going to pause it here. So I think if that would have stayed inbounds, I think Galvao would have still got the back, but it would have been a bit of a messier back take than when they reset in this position here.
So I think this is a really intelligent game strategy from Galvao.
Yeah.
The ADCC rule set and the way that the referees like to ref the match, and knowing that roll out of bounds, if he's got that seatbelt in over the top, he knows he's going to get reset in that position. It can go both ways sometimes at ADCC, but on this occasion it comes out in his favour, and they restart, as you quite rightly said, in a much stronger position in the centre of the map for Galvao. And you can make the argument that Palhares has been robbed a little bit there. You know, the scramble that might have happened if this was in the centre of the map might not have ended up in such a favourable position for him.
No, definitely. But as we sort of play through this bit here, you can sort of see the difference in the position from before the reset to what it is now. And Galvao's got such a strong seatbelt grip. And he rolls over, and he just gets that top hook, turns him back. And this position here, which I thought was quite an interesting one, like, because the points aren't in, so he doesn't really have to fight for the hooks just yet. But I'm going to pause here for one moment and talk through this sort of hip control that Galvao's got. Because I've been playing with this myself personally. My coach, Cam and Darren have shown me this, and me and Bonn have sort of had a little toe with this when we're rolling as well. And I really like the way that this controls the bottom hip. So I'm just going to get the adaptation tools. So yeah, so as you can see, Galvao's using his knees in this manner here, where he's squeezing in around the hips to try and control Palhares' hips in this manner. Now with this bottom leg as well, he's also going to be pulling his Palhares' hips underneath him. So it's going to make it really difficult for Palhares to sort of turn his hips to the sky and turn back up. And it also makes it a lot easier for Galvao to follow him as he starts trying to turn belly down, which happens a little bit further on into this. But is there sort of anything you want to add in there, Bonn, with this bit?
So normally when most guys get a seatbelt and they're looking to go for back attacks, most people will go straight for two hooks. Probably fair to say, isn't it? So
Yeah.
really, really interesting when we look at this position, the amount of control that he's able to get over the hips. Later on in the match, when Galvao does end up getting both hooks in, there's actually more space there for Palhares to move around, start turning into him and start mounting an escape. I totally agree with you in terms of what you were saying on the tightness on the hips here and that squeeze that we can get. It's a similar sort of position and squeeze to if you can get a body triangle. Yeah. And the same thing when we were looking at that top leg, what he's doing a great job of here is, you can't quite see it, but he's lacing his shoelaces on that top leg behind Palhares' knee. And one thing that I've noticed when playing around with this position that does really well is stops your opponent from basing that foot on the floor and stopping him from bridging and turning in. You're taking away a lot of the potential movement, and it's a really good tool to start implementing if you're looking for a control on that back position before going for the submission or a transition.
Oh, definitely. So should we play through a little bit more so we can sort of see and show the level of control that Galvao's got over Palhares?
Yep.
Let's go for it. So as you can see, Palhares here, he's trying to sort of get away, but that bottom hook control stopping him from being able to turn his hips, the seatbelt grips contorting and pinning his shoulders. And wherever he goes, Galvao's doing a great job of being able to just follow him and keep that hip control.
And the other thing that might not... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go on. No, I was going to add to it.
I was just going to say before it gets into the section where he's attacking on the face, the thing that might not be immediately obvious there as well is like the position you talked about before, the control on the bottom hip. If we think about the seatbelt being on the opposite side of the body, you can actually see the amount of twist and torque that's putting on Paul Harris's body. It's pulling his left hip underneath, but also pulling his right hip in the opposite direction. So like a twister in terms of the manipulation on the spine.
Yeah, and then this is where he starts to attack in the face now. And I think this is where Galvao starts playing Pal Harris at his own game. And he's like, because like we said before, Pal Harris' reputation is he's the kind of opponent that people don't want to face. He's like that sort of Mike Tyson effect where you're sort of looking, going, oh, shit, I've got to fight this guy now. I want to take my limbs home with me. Whereas I think Galvao's turning the tables on him here now. He's like, I've got you back. You're going nowhere. And again, look at the control he's got from having this sort of 3/4 hook, hip pin, like whatever you want to call it. But he's able to just freely attack and follow Pal Harris wherever he's going.
Yeah, again, like I just mentioned before, a really similar sort of benefit to a body triangle. You can follow your opponent a lot easier, especially if you've got the dexterity and flexibility in your legs to be able to open the triangle up and switch if your opponent's able to switch side to side. But again, as you can see there, if we can go back on that frame before we go belly down, the use of the shoelaces of the foot underneath to hook and elevate and stop your opponent from being able to base down and turn in, really useful tool. So, we can just see there that Galvao is using that pinch on the hips, but also using the shoelaces underneath. And you can kind of see Pal Harris looking for the floor with that foot, but not able to get a base down.
And like I said, mentioned before as well, as he starts trying to turn over and goes belly down, it gives Galvao the extra time that he needs to move over, follow him, and get that belly down pin. So he just transitions flawlessly to end up in this belly down position with both hooks in.
And again, that's intelligent use of the position, because if Pal Harris is going belly down, it's going to be more difficult for him to keep and maintain a good level of control from the top of the leg position that he had before. So good awareness on that and good switch out.
And like I said, for me, that hip control with the sort of like 3/4 hooks, I'm going to call it. It's like for me, because I've got short legs for my weight division, it's like the short man's body triangle. And again, he's looking for that constant attack. So he's trying to come out from the back here to attack that head and arm choke. But it just goes back to this hip pin again.
So you can kind of see there that with the hip pin is where he's having his success on the control. As soon as from that position where he was belly down, and then they ended up rolling back to the back, but he still had the hooks in. That was the first opportunity that Pal Harris had to start rotating in towards him, which opened up the opportunity for the head and arm triangle when he was kind of getting on his side on that 45, 90 degree angle, as opposed to being chest to back. Immediately being aware of that and then switching back to the 3/4 triangle or the hip pin that we were just talking about. Now he's got the control back.
I think as well what you mentioned before with him using his shoelaces to control and sort of turn Pal Harris back over. You can sort of see it here. This is what I've always been told is called like a judo hook, and he uses his just get the pencil. He uses this leg here to control this outer leg of Pal Harris. So again, turning his hips away from him to assert that control back over the hips when he feels like he's losing it. So he turns him back over and goes straight into that hip control again. And it's almost, you can sort of see the exertion that Pal Harris is putting in to try and escape here. Like I say, it's a very tiring position if you are actively trying to escape. And it's not overly tiring if you're attacking it. And what you didn't quite see here was Pal Harris, being the dirty so-and-so he is, peeling away at Galvao's thumbs and fingers and sort of pulling them right back in an attempt to break this vice-like grip.
Well, I mean, if you can't escape in a traditional manner, just pull the fingers back.
That's it. Or
white belt move 101.
That's well, Can wrist lock white belts. It's allowed, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Galvao looks pissed off about that. Rightly so.
Yeah.
And Palhares is like, what's your problem? What's your problem?
Oh, yeah. I think if I was in Galvao's shoes now and sort of assert the dominance that he's already had on him, I'd make it a bit of a mission now to make this position as miserable as possible for him. And you can sort of see he gets back into that stronger position again. He gets the higher hip control, and he's just sort of
noticed that in these ADCC matches, those resets are a bit suspect. Those refs need to be a little bit more on point with having the position that was before the reset.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing you'll notice is quite interesting here. I've only just picked up on this because I think at this point now is where the points might be starting to play in.
Yeah.
ADCC's got a funny rule set where you can put a hook in, take a hook out, put a hook in, take a hook out, and start to accumulate a few points here. And if you watch Galvao's footwork, sorry, go on.
No, Gordon Ryan took massive advantage of that in the last ADCC, didn't he? Switching that body triangle and, yeah, again, taking advantage of it here.
Yeah, and it's just looking at it like it's almost like he's sort of come in there saying, points are in. There's first set of points, and takes it away. Next set of points, comes out again.
Now, I'm not sure whether they've changed the rules on this recently, because they stopped it, didn't they? Especially from like a top half guard position where you've actually fully got to come out of the position before getting back into it to accumulate some points. But yeah, take advantage of it here.
Oh, definitely. And like I say, if Palhares isn't actively trying to escape, and it's sort of, and this is where he sort of gets out of there and loses control. But Galvao did a great job there of sort of almost being like, this is my mat. I'm the daddy. I'm gonna make sure that this is my win. And
again, what I'm saying was interesting from that position is, like we were talking about before, the positions where he had the 3/4 body triangle, the hip pinch, was where he had the control. The time when he went to a double hook position there and he didn't have the same level of control was the first opportunity that Palhares had to escape, and he took it.
No, definitely. And like I said, but for me, that back control that Galvao had there was arguably better than the double hook that so frequently gets taught and praised in grappling competitions.
And probably like a big downside on that is because it's so frequently taught, as well as attacking from the back, it's actually really difficult to get a finish in these positions sometimes because people are so familiar there, especially if you at your club you're training bad positional training. Rear naked choke defense is probably one of the first things that people are learning. So to get an effective finish from there on somebody who knows what they're doing is actually quite difficult. And you could argue that it exerts a lot of energy to get that finish if somebody's got intelligent defense on that.
Oh, definitely. And like I said, like Palhares didn't have the strongest grappling record leading up to this, but again, he's no slouch when it comes to the ground. So I think finding a choke on a player like at this level is going to be quite a high level achievement to achieve. Excuse me.
So now there's a bit of an exchange from the floor again, but the next point that we want to touch on is after Galvao has accumulated the points that he's just done on the floor there on the back, he goes into a bit of a defensive wrestling posture. So we'll cue that up and then we'll start breaking that down because that next element of the match is completely different from what's gone on so far, but equally as interesting.
Oh, definitely. Let's get this bit up. Oh. Okay, guys. So yeah, this next part we're just going to start looking at is going to be a bit of like Galvao's sort of defensive wrestling now. He's got up on points, and it's sort of time now for him to start to defend that lead. And Galvao does a really good job here of sort of defending against the Palhares onslaught of trying to get him taken down and that forward pressure. So he's constantly trying to keep the distance, put frames in place, and you can sort of see it's frustrating Palhares with the way that he's just clubbing. And if I just pause and rewind here, you'll sort of see what Galvao's doing with his collar tie to Palhares' posture. As opposed to having that constant pressure trying to pull him down, he's just sort of pulsing with his pressure. So he's pulling down, releasing, and this is going to disrupt his posture and his base that much more. And being on the receiving end of this, it's very, very frustrating and very, very hard to maintain that good posture. Like what you say, what do you think, Bonn?
Yeah, I love this technique. It's something that got done to me quite early on in my grappling career. It's super disorientating and incredibly frustrating to get off if you don't know what you're doing. There doesn't seem to be any intelligent defense there from Palhares with the arms. He's got a singular intent of getting in on those legs, so he's not really even bothered about clearing the collar tie off. And more fool him. He's on the receiving end of what is quite a distracting technique. It wears you out as well. It's very tiring. Just like constant yanking on your neck. It's breaking your posture down. Look at Galvao here. He's nice and tall and upright, strong posture. And Palhares is hunched over, his neck's bent. Anybody who's been on the receiving end of this knows that it's not the most pleasant position to be in.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, just to highlight the postures, you can sort of see Galvao's got a straight line there from his spine to his hips. And Palhares is just hunched forward. And just how tiring that's going to be on the lower back, on the neck, on the traps. It's not a nice place to be in, especially 15 minutes into a match, and it's the finals of this division. It's very, very exhausting, especially if your back filled up with blood and you've just been scrapping and trying to control your partner for 15 minutes. It's not nice. And then for Galvao to add in this pulsing technique.
So the thing that's interesting here as well that we've kind of just touched on is we were talking earlier about Palhares not really having any intent with diving in on the legs and Galvao being able to initiate the attacks from the bottom. The roles have reversed here a little bit. I'd kind of argue that, like we just talked about, Galvao is just defending. He's trying to maintain his points lead. But you can see, because he's not actually doing anything to attack, that's giving Palhares the opportunity to, when there's a space and time there, to go for it. As we'll see in a minute when we play through this, he's going to come down and get a really nice single leg because there wasn't anything really truly threatening there from Galvao. You often say this a lot, don't you, actually? You can kind of put it into any sporting context. When a team is on defence only, or you're not giving your opponent anything necessarily to think about, there's nothing there to defend, and you can start thinking about your attack. So really good lesson for any sport, but particularly including combat sports, is always give your opponent something to think about and defend. Because if you're not doing that, then you're just letting them attack. You're going to leave yourself open for either a takedown or a submission. So we'll play through this here, and we'll see that lack of initiative from Galvao, even though he's doing a good job of defending, actually leads to a pretty lazy snap down collar tie, and Palhares gets nicely in on the leg.
So they come back round. You can sort of see Galvao's left arm now, and he just keeps that, and he takes it again. And he just really starts to pulse on, break down Palhares' posture.
Yeah, the referee's had enough of that as well. It's just like, go and do something different.
Yeah. And here we go. Like, you can sort of see it's just disrupting, and it does a great job there of framing against him and keeping him away. But again, Palhares, I think, is doing a good job of clearing Galvao's grips.
Yeah, and you can see what his intent is as well. He wants to get in on that single leg like he did at the beginning of the match. So I think it's around about here, yeah. So he scoops that up nicely and then pinches the leg in between his thighs. Obviously not that time, but again, another example of seeing there what his intent is.
That's the one.
This is the one. Gets him up and gives him some beautiful air miles.
That's it. So we just take this back a touch. You can sort of see it was there's a bit of a lazy grab of the leg. So he comes in, he just hooks it nicely, but it's this second hand that I quite like. So it's this hip control as well as this the arm that he's got on the far leg. Does a great job of controlling Galvao, and he just lifts him up, gets some airtime. But you can also see Galvao's preparing himself to hit the ground, and then he
Does a great job of getting in underneath him, doesn't he? As you say, that hip control allowed him to pull himself underneath and able to get his most powerful tools, his legs underneath, and initiate that drive.
And then from there, slams him down. And he keeps a pretty forward pressure there. So this posture here is important for Palhares. It stops Galvao from getting back to his feet. And he's also secured his 2 points for the takedown. Which, again, just as important as like Galvao defending off. It's sort of getting him back on the points board and giving Galvao something else to think about, to go back to what Bonn was saying earlier. And this stops Galvao from being able to get back to his feet and get back to that defensive wrestling and take away those points that he's just rightfully earned.
Yeah, there's a sense of urgency now from Galvao to get up out of this position and stop any further advancement and extra points. And if we just continue on with this clip, we'll see that he ends up getting a really nice sweep off the back of this. So now, as you say, good preparation from a bit awareness that he's going to get that takedown, and just sets himself up beautifully straight into that butterfly position.
But I love the grit fighting here and the sort of breaking down of the Palhares' posture. And this sweep is just lovely.
Yeah, really nice entry.
And he lands, like, I was looking at the Estima fight last night from 2 years prior, and he tries his exact same sweep on Estima, where he's pulling the far leg, he's using both shins on the upper thigh, and he's hooked the other leg up near his ear. He didn't have the same level of success that he had against Estima as he did in this match here.
You look at the body mechanics and the difference between Braulio Estima and Palhares. There's probably at least a good foot's height difference between the two of them. Braulio is known 100%. For having those long legs. Palhares, he's got the nickname the tree stump.
Yeah.
Bit of a body mechanics difference there, so that's maybe why he got his success in this turn.
No, 100. I don't think Galvao would have got the points for this sweep here. Just going to take it back a little bit, because as we sort of touched on with the in the last match against Barnett and Lister, where they were keeping the heels elevated. Oh no, sorry, in the Cron and Marcelo match, where he's keeping the heels elevated. You can sort of see Galvao's turning over, and he does a lovely transition here to turn up and catch this leg, to keep this near side leg off the floor and out of use. And as Palhares starts trying to scramble, they go out of bounds, and he just keeps fighting and fighting and fighting to deny those points that Galvao nearly sort of stole back off him.
So this reminds me a little bit of the super fight against Penna in last year's ADCC, just aggressive wrestling, just going at him.
Oh, definitely. And sort of the rest of the match here turns into a bit more of a standoff in the wrestling, but you can sort of see there's a bit more a sense of urgency now from Galvao, where he starts attacking a few takedowns, and Palhares gets another takedown on him, but none of them were particularly secured, were they? But
no, there's a nice single leg takedown where he uses a sweep, and he's able to get control of Galvao's hips for a couple of seconds, but nothing really on control. Galvao gets straight back up. I think the next interesting point to look at will be the finishing series in this match, where Galvao's using his arm drag to single leg attacks.
No, definitely. So what we'll do, we'll get that bit queued up now, and then we'll go into that. So yeah, so as we mentioned, the remainder of this match comes into a bit more of a stand-up exchange, a bit of a clinch battle, and a couple of takedowns from both parts. So what we're going to do, we're just going to sort of play this part through, and we'll talk through it, and we'll sort of mention what we see. And we get to the final takedown from Galvao when he starts to try to retake the back. We're going to sort of break that down a little bit further for you all.
So yeah, in a similar way to our success that Palhares had on that previous single leg entry there. Again, another one, it's from a snap down, he comes straight down onto the single leg, but this time uses an outside foot sweep to get the back. Does initially a good job of controlling the hips, but Galvao just backs straight back up out of there. He doesn't want to give up any points at this point. I think at this point in the match, it's pretty close. The match ends up finishing 9 points to 4. So there's no way you can give up 4 points for a back take at this point.
No, can't. Like I said, I think like as much as we're praising Galvao for his ability to defend and get back to his feet, Palhares was doing a great job here of controlling the hips and trying to slow down Galvao when he got him down to the ground.
Yeah, really good exchange. And then the next 2 points of interest in the match, which we'll be coming up on in a second, is Galvao switches the tables now. He's probably been on the receiving end of a couple of attacks and seen that he's been close to giving up some points. He decides to turn the tables and starts using a really nice arm drag to single leg setup. So just as we were saying before, it's about taking the initiative in the match and giving your opponent something to think about can sometimes be the more decisive factor. So again, they're great, like leg tap. They're a little bit lazy, but the setup's really nice. Use this quite often myself. That arm drag to single leg opens up a lot of opportunities. Didn't have the success there because he wasn't able to get in on the hits or get a full seatbelt. Palhares was aware and was able to get straight back up, but in about 60 seconds or so, again, he gets the same entry and has a little bit more success with it this time.
Oh, definitely. And one thing I'd like to highlight here as well is his ability to think on his feet and to transition between techniques. So you can sort of see where he's going to pause it as he goes in for this takedown and he gets the single leg. So he hooks a single leg and Palhares, he's starting to sprawl and defend himself. The knee here, and he switches to this grip here where he's got this arm here is blocking the knee and this far arm's getting shot straight into the crowd. And as you start to see as the video plays on, he runs past his legs and places his hips past Palhares' legs. And again, Palhares does a great job of turning it into a scramble and getting belly down to defend himself in this position and eventually get back to his feet and turn it back into a bit more of a wrestling exchange. But was there anything you wanted to add to that, Bonn?
Just a really good point to think about from whether you're talking about wrestling, striking, or grappling. It's about they talk about it in wrestling as chaining attacks, and most often if you're going against experienced players, you're never going to get that first takedown. Just like you're never going to get that first submission. If you're just selling an armbar, the likelihood of getting an armbar is low. You've got to have different options, and you've got to be able to bait somebody with an attack and then chain it immediately into something else. And that's no different with wrestling. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of jiu-jitsu guys who don't have good wrestling make. It's thinking double leg. I'm going to hit that double leg and it's going to work on the first attempt. No, it's not going to work on the first attempt. Everybody's seen a double leg. They know how to sprawl. Yeah, unless you've got exceptional wrestling or judo, the likelihood is that you're not going to hit it on the first attempt. So have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 attempts lined up. And even if it's just 2 and you're switching back between double leg, single leg, double leg, single leg, something at some point is going to happen. You're going to get a good grip on something. Your opponent can't defend constantly. You've got to be able to stay one step ahead of their defense and throw enough at them that you're keeping ahead of them in the loop.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got to continue playing this. We're going to we've got this one more takedown that's from Galvao. And it's just before the match sort of finishes. But it's a sort of similar entry, like you said, Bonn. And he's attacking those hips and coming for that back.
Yeah, it's almost the exact same entry from the previous one. Arm drag and then single leg. It's a really interesting setup because naturally that arm drag forces you to put a lot of weight on the lead leg as you're driving through. And it's just a really good way of disrupting your opponent's balance. So, and again, just talking about what we were talking about there in chaining attacks together, it's knowing what reaction your opponent's going to have. No,
definitely. And like you said, he's not doing the pulse that we mentioned before to try and disrupt Palhares. So which kind of makes me think, is he going a bit more offensive with his attacks now? Whereas the pulsing would have helped him in chaining his attacks together. And just as we were talking, we sort of missed this lovely takedown to back take attempt, and this Hulk mammoth to sort of escape out of it.
So we can think about that first attack. If we go back and quickly have a look at this takedown again, the more successful one, he's data crunched what happened on that first takedown. He's seen Palhares' reaction, knows where his hips are going to go if he does this certain sequence of events. So the arm drag, the single leg. We know that, Galvao knows that his hips got a little bit away from him this time. So he knows he doesn't want to lose that opportunity on this attempt. He's going to stay tighter. He's got a lot deeper on the leg there, as you can see, and he's not using the underhook to elevate the arm this time. He's gone straight to the hips. So he's trying to close that space. Palhares still turns the same way, but he knows the reaction that he's going to get and dives straight on the back rather than getting into that scramble and exchange this time.
Well, definitely. I think another thing that I'd like to point out with this is the way that he uses the arm drag to capture the arm to sort of inhibit Palhares' defense. So as you can sort of see, he starts to set up and he looks for this arm drag, goes nice and deep with it and throws the arm across. But as you can sort of see, his shoulder goes straight in. And this arm here gets caught by this arm here, where he starts to go into the attack. And you can see Galvao's head captured Palhares' arm on the inside. Again, stopping him from trying to get the underhook, trying to defend more intelligently. And rather than trying to run the pike with it, he knows that he's got Palhares in the back foot. So he's just going to charge him forward and almost kind of make a statement with this takedown of being like, he probably knows he's 9-4 up. He's just going to run him off the mat to see how he responds. And then you can see he's like you said before, Bonn, he's data crunched. He knows which way Palhares is going to turn. And you can sort of see him straight away, seatbelt grip with his arms, and he's diving underneath the hips. And again, he feeds everything under, finds the seatbelt, and ties the hips up from the bottom.
Yeah, going back into that same great back control that we brought down earlier in the match. Not sure he's going to get the points for it, but again, just as you say, a strong stamp on the end of the match in the referees' minds and the crowd's minds that he won this match. Yeah,
definitely. And sort of probably this kind of thing would be the kind of move that would make Palhares lose a bit of sleep over it at night. Like, you can sort of see the way he's trying to come out of it, and you can tell he's not happy with a takedown.
Yeah, that's somewhat reminiscent of the way that he gave Gary Tonin some air miles in that Palhares match.
Yeah, definitely. But I think with Gary Tonin's weight difference, I think he probably flew a few more miles.
Yeah, he was some good ground clearance on that one.
But as we sort of draw to the end of the match here, you can sort of see now the distance Galvao's keeping. He's posting. He's just throwing things out there to look busy, so he doesn't really get any activity points. And the referee calls it, and that's the end of the match. And for this bit now is sort of the start of Galvao's reign of the ADCC, which for anyone who's not really observed it much, I'd highly recommend going over and watching his super fights that he's had so far. He's made a stamp, probably most likely of the ADCC world, and for me, like I said, he's possibly the greatest grappler that we've had, especially of our generation. There's arguments that Marcelo's there, Hodge is there, but I'm not quite sure if them two had the sort of same accolades that Galvao's had across both rule sets of the gi and the no gi.
Yeah, after this, he goes on to win so this is the 88 kilo category. He goes ahead and wins the absolute. And then from there, it's super fights. He's won that absolute. He sets up the super fight, and then it's just a series of dominance. And as you said at the beginning of the podcast, taking time away from MMA, which may have been a bit of a distraction on his grappling career proved the right move for him. It's meant he can cement his legacy, do a good job for cementing the legacy of his school and promoting the success of his students as well. And as we said at the beginning, the branches of success that have grown off that for everybody that's been involved and around Atos and Galvao has been evident to see.
Oh, definitely. But like I said, it was an entertaining match to watch prior to sort of analysing it. But sort of looking further into what they've both done in this sort of cement the techniques and what they've done, it's kind of, again, added another element of enjoyment to it. Seeing that Galvao playing with that back take and that back control that I didn't necessarily notice first time round, and it took me being shown it by my coaches, Cam and Darren, that the effectiveness of that control to fully appreciate it, and sort of seeing it in action nearly 10 years ago now. Just sort of shows that techniques that are all there. There's no sort of new techniques under the sun. It's already all been done. And looking back on through the archives of these records and through these matches is sort of showing a lot of things that we should be playing with and should be sort of analysing and pushing forward, rather than trying to claim everything as this new wave.
I think a good takeaway from the two matches that we've kind of looked at so far is anybody who's we're in a time at the moment where we can't train. There's no jiu-jitsu going on. We're right in the middle of the corona pandemic. Doesn't mean that you can't benefit from watching tape and studying and breaking down matches. There's so much jiu-jitsu out there to go back and look at. Take advantage of it. And it also plays into times where you might not be able to train as well through injury or illness. Doesn't mean you have to stop doing jiu-jitsu completely. So carry it forward into the future. Use it as a time to go and study. Sit there, break it down. It's been really interesting for us to do it. And hopefully you guys are getting the same benefit out of it as well. Game studying, tape studying, massively important. It opens up techniques that you're already familiar with and gives it a slightly different spin in it. See what works, figure out why it works, and implement that into your game when you can get back on the mats.
No, definitely. And like you said, it gives you that analytical eye as well. So if you're trying something and it's not quite working, you can sort of try find it in a match and see what the people that are doing it at the high levels are doing it right with. And you can take that back when you've analysed sort of your own kind of role and your own technique application to then correct it while you're practicing it or drilling it and working on these new skill sets that you're trying to add to your game.
So got another really interesting match for us there. Looking forward to getting into the next one. Anything you want to say to wrap up?
No, just thank you for tuning in and listening to us, guys. If there's any comments, any feedback, feel free to throw them in the comment section. Send us messages. The Facebook page will be live now, so please give us a follow, give us a share, and give us any feedback, and we'll be happy to get back to you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, agree. Really enjoyed this match and looking forward to your guys' support and comments to keep us going forward with this. Massively beneficial for me, and I'm sure beneficial for Simon, and hopefully as beneficial for you guys as well. So want to continue with this, bring and drag everybody's game up. So yeah, hit us up with some comments, give us feedback, and looking forward to seeing you guys on the next one.
Definitely. See you later, guys. Thank you.